Hey guys, it's me, Dr. Ree. In this video, we're going to be talking about the special senses. Now, there is so much we could go into for each of these senses. This is going to be very brief. You'll get way more in lecture. You'll get way more kind of exposure in other classes, especially when you go into physiology, if you go into physiology. So this is going to be more just identifying the parts rather than what they all do. When I think of vision, I just want to kind of review. We've gone through the last 2 weeks a lot of the central nervous and peripheral nervous system. And when I think of vision, I want to think of two things. First, I want to think of what cranial nerve am I thinking of? You should be going in your head, oh, I know, cranial nerve 2, the optic nerve. Heck yeah, that is what it is. So cranial nerve 2, and then what lobe of the brain would that be going to? And you should be going, oh, I know, occipital lobe. Right? The back of the head, right? Because humans, we just really like vision. So we give a whole lobe of the brain just for vision. So here we're looking at a few models, and we have an eye model in lab. It's not as cool as this one, but at least we got a picture of this model. So when we look here, you can see some different things. So our palpebrae are what are our eyelids. They're the muscles that are going to lift or close the eye. We see our lacrimal sac, so this would be the medial aspect. This would be near the nose on this side, and then this is on the outside. And so that is where our tear duct comes. So when we were talking about autonomic nervous system, cranial nerve 7 was innervating the lacrimal gland right here, and that's what's going to create our tears and kind of moisten up this area. You can see our pupil in the middle with the iris around it. That's the color of your eye. And then sclera is this kind of white layer that we see on this outer area right here. The bottom right here, that is the conjunctiva. And so if someone has conjunctivitis, that is inflammation of this. And so it gets really swollen and red right there. So those are some of the things. And here you can see lacrimal glands as well. So we have our lacrimal sac, lacrimal glands. They're all kind of interconnected. Now, if we go a little deeper, so into the tunics of the eye. So this is the vascular tunics. Vascular meaning it has the blood supply. So we have our pupil again, the iris. Here you can see that. So we had the sclera is the white, so that's the outer thick white kind of area. Ciliary muscle surrounds the iris. The ciliary muscle is what helps dilate or open up and close how big of a pupil we have, which changes the amount of light that we're allowing into the eye, which can change our ability to see different things in different lighting and to pick up different colors and things like that, shadows, all of that. Really cool stuff. We're not going to get into the physiology of it. We'll save that for phys. And then this is our choroid. The choroid is what actually has our blood vessels surrounding it. So it's kind of this outer area. Now, if we come here, we're going a little deeper. So again, here's the iris. We cut the choroid, and now we're behind. So underneath the choroid, we have our retina in the back. The retina is going to have a lot of the cell bodies that are involved in creating or understanding what light is coming into our eyeballs. We have this vitreous humor. And anything where humor, we're thinking kind of liquidish. Our lens is what refracts the light and allows it to be isolated into one spot. So if you've ever taken like a magnifying glass and tried to burn an ant, I advise you not do that because ants care about their lives. But if you did that, right, the light comes in and it pinpoints to a spot. That's kind of what our lens does. And again, we see that ciliary muscle there. Here's just looking at it from the side, so we see all of that. Here you can really see the difference. So I have my pupil, I have my iris. We can see that cornea is the area that's right behind there. What other ones haven't we talked about? Oh, and here you can see at the back, in the way back, we have our optic nerve, cranial nerve 2. So this is an image that you have in lab. Just kind of some of the points that we talked about. So we said an E, right? E in the very back, that would be my lens. In front of my lens, which we have D, and that is filled. This is the space between my lens and the cornea. So the cornea is the outside part. So this is the cornea. F is the cornea. E is the lens. The space between my lens and my cornea is called my aqueous humor. I can't spell, so let me aqueous. I think that's how you spell it, humor. Spelling doesn't count. as long as you just kind of get close. Here you can see that iris. So again, iris is the color part, and you can see it from the side. It actually is kind of on top of our lens on either side, and the space in between our two irises is going to be what's known as our pupil. And the pupil is just the amount of the lens that we can see in reality. So this is my iris. Here we have A is my ciliary body. And then this is known as my ciliary zonal. It's basically what pulls the ciliary. So it's just like the muscle fibers that pull that ciliary area and can cause the change of the size of our pupil. In the back here, G, this is all of that liquid space back behind the lens. So the liquid that is behind the lens, that is known as our vitreous humor. H in the back here, this space, which is, this would be right here is the optic nerve. The space right in front of the optic nerve is the optic disc. Below my optic nerve, so my optic nerve we can see is above, but if we think about this, this would actually send the light towards eye. And what we have in eye is called the fovea. The fovea is kind of that pinpoint area. And then in the back, this is just showing this that goes all the way around. If we remember what we called the white that went all the way around, that outer layer, that is my sclera. This is the layer below my sclera, which was my choroid. Remember that has my blood vessels in it. And then the most inner, we called that the retina. And the fovea is a part of the retina where there is like a blind spot. You can think of it kind of like a blind spot-like area. It's where that light is being centralized. And that's what we're looking at there. Now, if you just remember, so things we know about the eyes, we know that cranial nerve 2, optic, is going to see it. It's vision. Remember that cranial nerve 3, oculomotor, cranial nerve 4, trochlear, and cranial nerve 6, abducens, all are going to move the eye. So they move it. Cranial nerve 2 sees it. Cranial nerve 3, 4, and 6 are all going to move it. So let's just review again what those cranial nerves move. So if here's my eyeball, I have a few different muscles. So if I were to look, let's just put a nose here so we know. There's my nose. So that's the medial aspect. Cranial nerve 6, we'll start there. Cranial nerve 6 supplies the lateral rectus. So the lateral rectus, maybe I'll do it this way. I'll make a line with blue. So the muscle, that cranial nerve 6, is the lateral rectus, and that allows me to look laterally. Cranial nerve 4, trochlear, is going to supply the superior oblique. The superior oblique allows me to look down and in at my nose. So think about when you cross your eyes. That motion of crossing your eyes is done by cranial nerve 4, trochlear. So that's my superior oblique. Cranial nerve 3, oculomotor, supplies the others. So what others do we have? We have our medial rectus. We have our superior rectus, which allows us to look up. We have our inferior rectus, which allows us to look down. And then we have our inferior oblique, which allows us to look up and out. And those are the muscles of the eye. Now let's move from vision to hearing. So again, let's talk in our brains. Let's go back and talk first about what we learned in peripheral nervous system. So last week, peripheral nervous system, hearing, give you a second to answer yourself. Cranial nerve 8, vestibulocochlear. Cranial nerve 8, vestibular-cochlear, is going to send it to what lobe in the central nervous system? Good, temporal lobe. Okay, so we're just kind of reapplying some stuff. So now we're going to look, zooming on out. So we have, and I don't know if this image, it does. So here we see that vestibular cochlear nerve. So here's that cranial nerve. This is where it's all kind of connecting. And we see that vestibular cochlear sends to our cochlea here. And then we have these semi-circular canals, and those are all related to my vestibular system, which is my balance and equilibrium system. It has liquid in there, and as we move, that liquid is going to move these little kind of like crystal-y things there, and that's how we can tell if we're in equilibrium or not. And so if someone gets kind of stuffy in their head, that's why their equilibrium goes out, because the pressure in the head will change the way that this water reacts and that our brain tells us, are we in balance or not? And then there's this thing called positional vertigo, and positional vertigo literally means we have these like crystals that get stuck in a certain area of these semicircular ducts, and it makes your body think that you're going around in circles because it's not moving, it gets stuck, so it thinks that you're still kind of like off pressure. And if you put yourself in different positions, and there's some PT or chiropractic movements that you can do, orthopedic movements that you can do to help try to loosen up by changing the position of your head in various a special kind of sequence. Anyway, that's me rambling, but that's the vestibular system. So that's what we're looking at right here. When we look at the cochlear system, which is going to be our hearing system, we see that we call this the external ear. So there's three parts of the ear. We have our external ear, our middle ear, and then our inner ear. So the external ear is what I feel when I can take your hand and you touch your ear, right? We call the auricle this space right on the outside. Here's the external acoustic meatus. We saw that on the skulls. Whereas our internal acoustic meatus, right, is going to be on the inside of the skull. So external, internal, right? So that's just kind of where we're looking at here. Here you can see that connection of in here. So as we go in and up, this is going to be where we have our cochlea and all that. We could keep going from our ear down into the pharyngotympanic tube, and that's going to send us towards our throat, into our pharynx area. So you can kind of see how our ear is connected to our pharynx, which is connected to our mouth, which is connected to our nose, you know, and all of that stuff, all of it's connected so that we can have drainage and things like that. So I just wanted to show you that that's what this tube is right here. Now, back to what we were looking at. So, external ear, sound comes in, zoobadoo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. It comes in and it hits these bones right here. Well, it hits this tympanic membrane. The tympanic membrane is like a big drum, like a timpani, and it goes bum, bum, bum. And it makes the sound that we have coming in our ear, that vibration, vibrate these three little bones that are right here. Those are the three ossicles of the ear. We have our malleus, our incus, and our stapes, and they're going to work together, and I think I have a picture of that, and they are going to cause a vibration to then affect within our ear into our cochlea, which the cochlea is then going to translate that information and send it to the vestibular cochlear nerve, and that vestibular cochlear nerve is going to send it to the temporal lobe so we understand what we heard. Here you can kind of see a little zoomed in. So here's that cochlear nerve, here's the cochlea, here's the vestibule, and the semicircular canal. So this is part of the vestibular system, okay, right here, vestibular system. So you can see how close everything's related. This is going towards these ones. And here we see those, the malleus is then going to hit the incus is going to hit the stapes, and the stapes is going to send a vibration, cochlea is going to pick up on it, send it through the cochlear nerve to the temporal lobe. So that's kind of what the inner ear looks like. So these are part of the inner ear. Outer ear, middle ear, inner ear. Now this is the diagram that you'll see in your lab book, and it has a few different parts of our ear. So again, the outer ear, we call that our auricle. Here we have our middle ear, or you can call that our auscultation tube. Here we have our tympanic. Membrane, okay, so we had sound coming in. We'll just kind of review that. So sound coming in, comes in, travels through this whole part, and it hits that tympanic membrane, and it goes bum, bum, ba-dum, bum, right? And And that's going to then affect those 3 bones that we saw on the inside. So, I call this middle ear. You could also call it the ear canal. I realized I didn't say that. So, tympanic membrane. The other word for that would be eardrum. So if someone says they broke their eardrum or anything like cracked their eardrum, that's kind of what they're talking about there. I think I said eustachian tube. That's what this is called. So that was my bad. I think I was... So, don't come back at me about that one. I fixed myself. All right. Anywho, okay, so that tympanic membrane hits the eardrum, and the eardrum is going to affect those 3 bones. So, the bones go in this order. Malleus, which then is going to hit my incus, which is then going to hit my stapes. So, my malleus hits that, and then hits my stapes, okay? So that's kind of the order of them. Once it hits that, we then send that information inward. Up here, we had our semicircular canals, which are part of the vestibular system, our balance system. That's going to hit our vestibule. And then we have our cochlea, and we have our cochlear nerve. Cochlear nerve is cranial nerve 8. So that's kind of the hearing idea. Of course, there's a million things you could learn about that, but this is a lab course, not a lecture course, so I'm not going to go into all of the nitty-gritty there. All right, from there, our last one is taste. So let's do the same thing we did with each of them. What cranial nerve do I think of when I think of taste? There should be 3 that come to mind for you. We have cranial nerve 7, our facial nerve. That did the anterior 2/3 of the tongue. We have cranial nerve 9, glossopharyngeal, which does the posterior 1/3 of the tongue, as well as the pharynx. And cranial nerve 10, vagus, which does taste of the larynx and trachea, but larynx, right? And remember, larynx can taste things, right? Something starts to come up your throat. You can taste that before it gets into your mouth, right? That's because we have ability of tasting in our larynx, way down there. All right, so when we look, we're going to focus just at the tongue itself, looking at the tongue. So in this diagram, we can see that we got a whole lot going on, but let's just kind of look at it. So this back area right back here, we're looking at a thing called the epiglottis. So the epiglottis, we're going to talk more about the epiglottis when we get in, but the epiglottis is the space in the back of our throat, and the epiglottis is going to send that air or food down, and that's going to go to our stomach and things like that. So that's what we're looking at back there. What we're looking at on the side right here, on either side of here, just so we can kind of orient ourselves, is we're looking at the palate. There's this kind of arch that has support in the back of our mouth. So this is at the back of their throat where they're reaching their epiglottis, and we have it's called the palatopharyngeal arch. So it's a part of our palate in our pharynx. It's kind of we call this space right here. This is our tonsils. When someone says your tonsils, this is what they're talking about. They're technically called the palatine tonsils. So we have our palatine tonsils on either side. That's what people, when I'm like, oh, my tonsils are swollen, they're typically talking about the palatine tonsils. But we also have, in the back of the tongue, our lingual tonsils. So realize that we have 3 tonsils. We have our lingual tonsils in the back and our palatine tonsils on either side. So this was called the palatopharyngeal because it was between the pharynx and the palate. This one on this side is called the palatoglossal arch. And that is because it's between the palate and the tongue, glossal being tongue. So now we're going to talk about some of the other areas of the tongue that can be identified. So this space between my papillae, these are my papillae right here, and my tonsil, that space right there in between the two is called the terminal sulcus. This is where the part of the tongue ends, so that's the terminal part of that means. So we call that the terminal sulcus. I just said that those round ones you see right there, those are known as my circumvallate papillae. I just call them the papillae, but they're technically the circumvallate. We have a couple of different papillae. Papillae are just areas that have taste buds. They're a fancy name of saying taste buds. So we have a couple of different types of taste buds. So in the very back, we have our circumvallate. If we continue on the sides of our tongue, on either side, see how it's a little wavy in this picture? Those are our foliate. I remember foliate is on the side, and it kind of looks round like ridges, because think of when you exfoliate your skin, right? It's rough. So I look at this and it's the rough part of the tongue that's called the foliate. So just like if you were to exfoliate, it's rough. And it's rough on the sides. If we look at in the middle of our tongue, kind of the really big ones, those ones are called our fugiform papillae. The ones that are really, really tiny and that are kind of surrounding the side of the tongue, so really, really tiny taste buds, those are my filiform. Think of they're really small, so they have to fill the space. And then this is just not pointing to an actual, so this is pointing to the tiny ones, this is pointing to the bigger ones. This is just pointing to what we call this. So the top, the part of the tongue that we're looking at here is the dorsum of the tongue. Now, we're not going to get into the nitty-gritty of what makes up a taste bud. We'll leave that for in your lecture. But those are some of the main ideas that I just want you to understand when looking at the tongue itself. If you have any questions, please let me know, and I will see you in lab.